It's a brand new week and we're ready to do what we do best. Welcome to Jasiri, where bold conversations meet real impact. And as always, we're here to ask the tough questions, challenge perspectives, and inspire action. Let's set the tone for the week together with stories that matter and voices that move the conversation forward. Now, on Saturday, the world marked the International Day of the Girl Child, a day dedicated to amplifying the voices, dreams, and power of girls everywhere. And though we may have celebrated quietly over the weekend, here on Jasiri, we're bringing that energy into a new week because every day is a good day to celebrate the girl child. We'll get into that conversation in just a moment. But
first, ladies, I already know you had, a more interesting weekend compared to mine. So let's hear it. So Lou, you've been talking about
Why was your weekend bland?
It was because I think I used this weekend to rest. Yes, I think the only thing I did was go to church because I hadn't gone to church in a really long time. So I would always, watch online, join online, and all that. So I decided. And the funny thing was, yesterday when I was about to get ready for church, it started raining.
That rain. Right around 9:30.
Yes, and I was like, oh, maybe God didn't want me to go to church. I'm serious. Like, do you know? So I went back to sleep, and then I woke up, and it was almost about time for third service. And my spirits it was really strong. Go to church. I was like, no, wahala. I got up, got dressed, and I made it for third service, and I enjoyed myself. It was fun.
Somebody shout hallelujah for the sister. For the person that really enjoyed the weekend. So
yes, Tolu.
You see me adjusting
because our own is righteous. So let's
excuse me. What is in righteous? What is irrighteous, unrighteous? In my what is the opposite of righteous? What's
the righteous took out?
I told you guys I was going for Owambe and I went for Owambe. Congratulations to Mr. Molly and of course Temi Orioye.
Yay! Because I love Molly.
Yes, they were the cutest couple. We had so much fun. I ate. I don't know. I lost count at like 7. Jesus. Not 7 of what I ate, 7 of what was like 7 courses served. Come down.
Only you. And they look dressed to the teeth.
When I go for events and people say they're going to eat everything, I'm like, I can't.
It's impossible to eat everything.
No.
Like when they start to come out with those their fish, it's late in the evening. What I just do, I just get it in the foil and take
pack it to go.
Because half of that time I'm already done.
Crepe. What do you call crepe? Is it crepe? Yes,
crepe.
It's crepe.
Yeah.
When we walked in on dessert being served. I was like, this is not working. Will it? This is not working. But they made better, They made well. There's amala, there was asaro, there was ofada, and then R&B. I didn't know we're calling rice and beans R&B this day. Yeah, R&B was on the menu as well.
Okay.
I don't know. I've always liked rice and beans, so I don't think. Some people feel like it's not something for an event gathering, but I think anything you like can be served. Anything you like.
Lola was looking like a northern princess.
Oh my God!
This weekend.
Yes. This weekend I had the privilege of going to my home church, the Fountain of Life Church. They had like a women conference, Discovery for Women, and I was the host for the Sunday event. It was really nostalgic.
Righteous, unrighteous.
It was really nostalgic for me because, that was where I started my Christian walk. And, Pastor Taiwo and Pastor Bimbo Dukoya. Now we have Pastor Tolu, Pastor Toby, and Pastor Jimmy Oduko at the helm of affairs. So imagine all the lady pastors, they're like mothers to me. So when they see me, I now became like a little girl. I was kneeling down, greeting everyone. Oh, Pastor,
it was like the homecoming.
Exactly. It was really, really amazing. I just like the fact that women are being poured into from all sides. Everywhere. They had like 3 days. So you can imagine the amount of knowledge. They had an Ibukwa Oshika on the panel, Pastor Banfu, so many women that are bringing different perspectives. Now, the church is talking about marriage in less strict terms. Like those times that they will say, oh, if you are beating, you stay there. Now they will say, if your life is tied to it, run, no.
Well, we're talking about finances now. It's really so interesting. To hear the kind of commentary, I might say, or preaching that's coming from the pulpit these days, that's calling out certain things. And it's quite
it's nice.
It's nice. It's not all I agree with.
Yeah, it's
but
not all I
just,
agree with.
At the end of the day, we like to
but
see it.
at the end of the day,
That's
we
really
like
important.
to see it.
I wanted to say, I actually made a friend in church yesterday as well.
A boy?
I sat down close to this really pretty lady. No, she was so cute. And I had to tell her after service, I was like, you look so beautiful. And she was like, oh, thank you so much. And she collected her number.
And now you become besties when you should be sitting next to a man.
Eto, as man never come, let's start with the female first now.
You never know if this is the conduit to the man, Lolo.
Exactly.
Well, it could be his brother. Because we need to take this Hausa girl off the market.
Oh my goodness.
I need some Hausa babies.
Finally.
Anyway, on Saturday, just like Tolu said, the world marked International Day of the Girl Child. Every girl deserves to dream freely, to be heard, and to take up space in a world that often tries to shrink her light. So joining us now is award-winning journalist and News Central Senior International Correspondent, Afua Hagan. Afua, welcome back to Jasiri.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's good to be back, ladies.
Yeah.
Afia, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. I know me and you have been talking, so let's take a deep breath. We're gonna do this. So
yes, we are.
So this International Day comes just after last week's news that former BBC Radio 1 DJ Tim Westwood is now the subject of an official investigation following decades. I need to stress that.
Wow.
Decades of multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. Afia, thank you for being willing to share your experience with us. And before we talk about the broader issues, how are you feeling in this moment, seeing that this investigation is finally underway?
Relief. I think relief is a huge emotion. I think actually since this investigation really started around 2022, there was a sense that, oh my goodness, people are actually listening. And like you so rightly said, Tolo, this has been going on for decades, and I think finally that he's been charged, I felt relieved. But there's also really a sense of anger that we have been telling our story for years. And people just didn't listen. People didn't listen because the victims were mainly Black women like myself, right? And there was a real sense that the police, the BBC, and other institutions that were involved, Capital Extra, where Tim Westwood went to, DJs and other people who kept the secret, promoters that kept booking him, just didn't care about Black women. So now that he's been charged, there's definitely a sense of relief, but it does bring about a sense of anger as well.
There is a 174-page report that lays out heartbreaking testimony from so many young women, mainly young Black women. The worst allegations are redacted because of ongoing police investigation. There are allegations going as far back as 1983. Can you tell us what your experience with Tim Westwood was?
Well, my personal experience with Tim Westwood was when I was a student. So I was a student at university, and as you do, you want work experience. I was really, really keen to get work experience in radio, in journalism, and at that time he was at the BBC. He had the Radio 1 rap show, something that I actually used to listen to growing up. So I sent out, emails to literally every single DJ at Radio 1, and he got back to me along with someone else and said, come along to the show, let's have a trial, see how you get on. And bear in mind, the Radio 1 rap show was late at night. It was around midnight. And it was on the weekend, on a Saturday night. So I told a male friend of mine, one of my friends in Hull, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. Can you believe I've got this amazing work experience? And I must admit, from the jump, he was a little bit suspicious. He said to me, well, why would your first meeting with him be at his show at midnight? Shouldn't you have a meeting with him first? I was overexcited. I said, no, look, he's invited me to go to the studio, invited me to go to the show. There might be some rappers there. This is a really cool opportunity for me. So he had said, just keep in touch throughout the evening. And actually, I think that's what saved me essentially from being more hurt in this situation. So I go along to Radio 1, I go along to Radio 1 rap show. The first thing I remember is how many young women were in that room. in that studio or in the surrounding areas, there was loads of us. And I was really surprised. I was like, well, how many work experience people does he need? Naively, that's my thought. Why could there be so many people doing work experience at the same time? But, I was really green. Thought I was there to make tea and find CDs and do all this stuff. So the show went on, and the girls were just kind of vibing and drinking, and I was not doing any of that because I was quite diligent and was like, I am here to work. I really want the work experience. So I was trying to, look at how they do the interviews and play the music, look at the playlist, all that kind of stuff. So the show ended, and one of his people, I don't know if he was a bouncer, I don't know if he was a fellow DJ, whoever he was, came over and said, Westwood would like a word after the show. So I was like, this is it. This is going to be my big break. This is when he's going to tell me, I've got a job with him. So he took me off into a side room, and I was sat there waiting, and I called my friend and I told him, okay, so this is after the show, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to have this one-on-one chat with Westwood. And he said to me, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And I was like, oh, you're just being overprotective. It will be fine. I hung up the phone. I hung up on him. So Westwood comes into the room. He sits down beside me. He's asking me, where I'm from. Obviously, I have a Scottish accent. So he was like, you're not from London. We're talking whatever. He puts his arm around me. He puts his other arm on my knee. And then I think to myself about what my friend has said. And a penny drops. And I think, I'm in trouble now. I am in trouble now. And then my friend rings, and my phone starts ringing and ringing and ringing, and he gets annoyed, and he's like, who's that? So I jump up, I take the call. I'm like, oh, it's my dad. My dad's calling me. I've got to take this call. I jump up, I run out the room, I take the call, and my friend is like, how are you getting on? I'm telling him what happens, and he says, get out of there now. I have my bag on me. I don't have my coat. I literally leave the studio. I just leave the studio. I get out of there, get out of Radio 1, and I never go back. Left half of my stuff there. And I think to myself that the arm around me was bad enough, the hand on my leg and creeping up my leg and getting further up my leg was bad enough. I don't know what happened to the other women who were there. I've heard the stories of what happened to other women years later and years before. And I think, it was chilling, and it was shocking to me, and it was definitely going down a road which I was not expecting. It could have been so much worse. And I didn't tell anybody apart from my friend and who I was on the phone with. I didn't tell anybody else what had happened. But I heard so many more stories from women like myself over the years. And there's a real sense of, I should have said something. I should have said something at the time. Perhaps I could have prevented what happened to another girl, another woman down the line. But when you look at all the allegations, and when you look at how many women did speak out, and how much the authorities didn't do anything, how much he was enabled to continue doing these actions, you think to yourself, well, maybe if I had spoken up, maybe nothing would have been done. Yeah. Perhaps it would have just carried on. And actually it did, because so many people did speak up and nothing was done along the way.
Yeah. Well, Afua, you are really a strong woman. I mean, for you to come out and speak about this, because we know how difficult it is, for other women to do so. But what gave you the strength, to come forward, share your experience publicly, especially in an industry where silence can sometimes feel safer than truth?
Silence is so much safer than truth, and you've absolutely nailed it. And especially for a Black woman in the industry in the United Kingdom. I think for me was when I heard so many other stories, but also when the Guardian newspaper in 2022 were doing this special investigation, and they had, I think it was 7 people initially who they were investigating with, and they asked for more women to come forward. And I knew at that point that this was the moment, this was the time where I had to say something, where I had to speak up, where I had to add my voice. And there's that thing of one person has said something, another person has said something. When there's a chorus of you, when there's more than one, you take that strength from everybody else. You think, I'm not the only one. And let me add my voice to this. There's strength in numbers. And I think it was the other women together with myself made me feel strong enough to speak out. And also I must say that the journalists from The Guardian were really, they really felt like they gave us all a safe space to be able to speak, a safe space to be able to tell our story without judgment. And we knew that we were being taken seriously, and that was really, really important.
And As Afua is talking, I'm just thinking about the entertainment, the media industry here in Nigeria. You're talking about a situation happening in the UK. How much worse is the situation here? I've had my own share. I won't lie. I've had my own share. I've come up in this industry going on about 20 years now. And I had it almost from the beginning, as you said. You were looking for work experience almost from the time I started my internship.
Let me tell my own story.
And I'm looking at Lolo now because I know she has shared. We have our stories. And the issue is when we talk, we are not listened to. It almost feels like it almost feels like it has to be like a rite of passage for young women in the media, in the entertainment and creative industries, and that's not what it should be. You have so many young girls watching us now who may not know how to report, who may not know how to how to even name what happened to them or even address inappropriate behavior, especially when it comes from someone influential or someone who is in a leadership position or someone who, whoever it may be. What do you say to them today, particularly because we seem to be in a time where, as you said, this has continued happening because maybe he was targeting young black women in the UK. Okay, here, we're not going to talk, we're all black here. Yeah. It's all young women, all black women who are going to be interning around, or Nigerian women interning around everywhere. So it's not a silence maybe because it's a demographic. So what do you say to young women listening to you today?
Listen, I think there's so many points at play, and what you said is absolutely right, is that this cuts across the intersection of race. This is about men in positions of power and the gatekeeping that occurs when men are in positions of power, because they are the ones that are going to open the doors for us to get those internships, to get those jobs. And there's another point that you made there, Tor, that I think is really interesting as well, is that being able to vocalize and name what happened to you. It took me a little while to be able to process what was what had happened to me in that moment. It took a few weeks, in fact, to be able to process. And actually, other women that I spoke to said the same thing, that it was perhaps a few months down the line that they realized an abuse of power has happened here. I need to name this, and then I need to call it out. And I think what I would say to any young woman in this position is take that time if you need it, but call it out and always tell someone, always tell the authorities. But I would also say to the authorities is listen to women. Believe women. We understand that very, very occasionally there's cases out there where women make false accusations. And that makes women who things have happened to not want to come forward because we think we're not going to be believed. Always speak up. Absolutely always speak up. But also, there's a conversation that needs to be had around more women being in these positions of power. So perhaps we don't need to have the gatekeeping and the sexual harassment and the sexual assault and the paying of sexual favors that happens so women can get ahead in the industry. I think that's really, really important as well. As long as we continue having men in positions of power, these stories are going to keep happening. It's as old as time immemorial. It's been there and it will continue to be there as long as we still have men gatekeeping in these positions of power.
You know, I'm listening and I'm so encouraged by the fact that you have the courage to speak up. We just recently celebrated the International Day of the Girl Child, which is about empowering girls to speak, to lead, to be safe in every space. What does this mean to you personally, Afua, especially as someone who has used her own voice to challenge abuse of power?
You know, it's so important that girls and women have these spaces to be able to speak up, have the courage to be able to do so. And as well as someone who has challenged, you know, abuses of power, I'm also a mom. I'm a mom of a 13-year-old girl. And I always encourage her to live out loud, to be herself, to live fully as herself, to take up space, but also to challenge the system. So that going forward, while she's breaking glass ceilings, she's also clearing up the glass behind her so another woman doesn't have to cut her foot. And also, so that she's empowering other women to come behind her. We all have a responsibility to do that, ladies. All of us. We all have a responsibility to make sure that while we're breaking that glass ceiling, we're making the way for women behind us to come through. It's absolutely our responsibility, because let me tell you, I wouldn't be here where I am now without someone doing it for me. We have to be able to pay that forward. It's just so, so important. So International Day of the Girl, I think for me, actually this year, it felt somber because I feel like the rights of women are being repealed pretty much the world over. I mean, in the United States, we all know what's happening with the president. It's quite authoritarian, who's having meetings about women's health but don't have any women in the meetings. Here in the United Kingdom, we have a right-wing racist movement that's co-opting the rights of women, that say they're acting on the rights of women to forward their racist agenda. And it's never been about safety of women. It's never been about the rights of women. And actually, those rights are going backward. So I feel like it was somber this year. And actually, that needs to push us to do more. Not just an International Day of the Girl, not just an International Women's Month, but every single day, we have to continue doing the work to make sure that the rights of women continue going forward.
So, Afua, we want you to stay with us because our conversation on creating a world where every girl is safe and free to choose her path continues after the break. We'll be introducing another guest. Up next, Angel Nduka-Nwosu, an award-winning writer and founder of the Emecha Collective, a safe space for women in writing, research, and content creation, also joins this conversation. Stay with us.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on Jasiri. Now, according to UNICEF, 7.6 million girls in Nigeria are out of school, and that's 3.9 million at primary level and 3.7 million at junior secondary level. Globally, girls are disproportionately denied education, pushed into early marriage, or even forced to drop out of school due to poverty and traditional norms. Now, these numbers are not just statistics. They are stories of dreams deferred, of voices muffled, of potential sidelined. But this is not just a conversation about education. It's about confronting challenges and renewing our commitment to a world where every girl can thrive, lead, and live without fear. Now, joining us now is Angel Nduka-Nwosu, an award-winning writer and founder of Emecha Collective, a safe space for women in writing, research, and content creation. We also still have Afua Hagan with us as well. Thank you for staying with us, Afua, and thank you for being with us, Angel.
Thank you so much. Afua, very quickly, before the break, you had shared your experience with Tim Westwood, and just for those who do not know, now Tim Westwood has now been charged with rape and sexual assault, and it's a litany of charges. He's been charged with 15 offenses relating to 7 women. Westwood has been charged with 4 counts of rape, 9 counts of indecent assault, and 2 counts of sexual assault. These go from 1983 all the way to 2016. Afua, in that time, in the experience you had, and even in the work you've been doing as a journalist, do you think that the public's response to women's stories have evolved or is evolving? Or are there still cultural and institutional barriers that keep survivors silent? And I also add this. I don't know if I sent it to you. Me and Afua talk a lot. I don't know if I sent it to you. This weekend, there's a report that came out in the US that men are actually betting on the period cycles of women in the WNBA, Women's National Basketball League in the US, betting that on their cycles they will perform worse than they normally do to make money. And some guy even joked, is this blood money? Afua, have we evolved at all?
I actually saw that story. You did send it to me. Listen, I don't think we have evolved, or I don't think society has evolved enough. I think there is still those institutional and cultural barriers. I think especially when it comes to the United Kingdom, and I think I alluded to this earlier, is that because most of the victims, pretty much all of the victims, when it comes to Tim Westwood, were Black women like myself. So there was a real air that institutions, that the police, that broadcasters, that the people that employed him, the people that continue to employ him up until today, the promoters who still book him, especially in Nigeria, don't care about Black women, don't care about their stories, don't care about the allegations. The window of time from 1983 to 2016, that's almost as long as I have been alive. That is ridiculous that people knew about Westwood from that time. My friend who I told I was going to his show said to me afterwards, I'd heard about him and women. That's why I was so worried about you going to the show. Like, people knew, it was like an open secret in the industry for years. When he left the BBC, when he went to another broadcaster, people were saying to that broadcaster, but he has this terrible reputation. Why would you hire him? Yet they did it anyway. Then he flees to Nigeria and goes to play in Lagos and all these places. People will reach out to the promoters and say, but he has been accused of all these terrible things. Like you said, Tolu, a litany of charges. And they'll book him anyway. And so I think we are still very behind, actually, in how people are reacting to this news. We haven't evolved. Now that he has been charged, now that it's, you know, there's charges leveled against him for rape, for sexual assault, you know, that's only a certain number of women. That's not all of us. That is certainly not all of us. Those are the ones they've managed to bring to trial. There's hundreds of women involved. Are we now going to have a situation where he's not going to be booked, where he's not going to be on the radio? We would love to see that collectively. Will that happen? It remains to be seen. You know, December's coming up. It's a huge time in Ghana, Nigeria. You know, DJs are flown out to play. I do not want to see him on any lineup. But will he be there? Who knows?
All right, let me pass the next question to you, Angel, in the studio now, because UNICEF data released late last year show that more than 370 million girls and women alive today, or even 1 in 8, you know, experienced rape or even sexual assault before the age of 18. Angela, sadly, you know, Afia's experience is one shared by millions of women around the world. So, when we look at Nigeria now, what do you think about how we as a society continue to handle the issue of gender-based violence?
In all honesty, I think that we're not adequately giving, I don't like calling women victims, survivors, the space to share their stories without shame. So around 2018, 2019, we saw the Me Too movement happen. We saw protests in Nigeria, like Busola Akolu coming out to accuse the pastor of Koza, and there were protests about that. But post-2019, after 2019, we're not seeing a lot of movements that encourage women to actively speak. So yes, sometimes women call out rapists and sexual abusers on social media, but one thing I always ask is, what is the aftermath of that?
Yeah.
Is it a case where young girls who are watching just know that, oh, this man has been called out for being a rapist or being a sexual assaulter, and give it 2 weeks, give it 3 weeks, he's out, you know, launching his new clothing line, or he's out talking about how some of them even rebrand to being women allies. Some of them get into feminist spaces to, some of them get into feminist spaces and start manipulating the resources that are supposed to be for women and girls while still being sexual assaulted. So to answer your question, I would say women are speaking up more. I mean, if I'm going to put myself here, in 2020, I called out somebody who assaulted me. But I would say we're not giving survivors the adequate support that is needed to ensure that if they call out somebody who has assaulted them or raped them, they do not face the repercussions of actively talking about it. The shame is slowly removing, I would say in my generation, because I'm proudly Gen Z. The shame is slowly removing because we've seen a lot of Gen Z women come out and say, this guy did this to me and I'm not going to wear that shame. But in terms of how adequately we are providing survivors with the tools to navigate, you know, calling out, the aftermath of calling out, I would also say, and I'm going to bring class here, not every woman has the tools and can afford to speak about a man who has sexually assaulted her. A few weeks ago, I'm not going to mention his name, we saw a very big case of somebody, a musician, who was accused of, well, sleeping with, quote and unquote, sleeping with his domestic help. Allegedly. Sleeping with his domestic help, or rather, sleeping with his domestic help. And then I kept on wondering, like, how many women can even afford to say, this person did this to me without their jobs being on the line.
Because it's a power imbalance.
It's a power imbalance. Without their jobs being on the line, without being told, oh my God, just take it in, you know, it's a good thing for you that he's, you know, looking your way and all of that. So it's a complicated conversation. On one hand, I want to say we're making progress because 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't even have been able to come out and say, this is what happened to me. My entire history, as my entire trajectory as a journalist would have gone down the drain if I had called out somebody in the same industry as me who sexually assaulted me. But now I'm able to say it, and you know, I'm saying it on live TV without crying, without feeling shame.
You know, so two things. You talked about shame, and I always remember Giselle Pellicot, the French woman whose husband drugged her for decades and then called men in to sexually assault her. There was one other guy who said, who appealed his judgment recently, and thankfully he has been found guilty again. And now his sentence has been extended because he said he didn't know that she did not consent. She was not somebody that was not aware of everything. But the reason I bring her up is Giselle Pellicot said that shame needs to change sides. That's one. But I want to go back to this institutional thing. And Afua, I'll bring you back into this because when we talk about institutions, we think that institutions like the BBC have it together. You have a reporting line. You have a situation in which you can go to HR and tell them and it will be investigated. And Angel, just hold on because I want to talk about institutions in Nigeria. But Afua, institutional barriers to women either speaking up, to women being able to break the glass ceiling. What do we say about that? Especially a company as illustrious as the BBC. This should never have gone long. I think he was with the BBC for 19 years, and he faced a number of allegations during that time. So when you talk about institutional barriers and you have a situation like the Tim Westwood story, and then you look at the BBC, does it even give us any hope that companies are even willing to take on these conversations?
Right. This went on for decades under their watch, in their house. People came forward, complained to them, and nothing was done. If you look at the BBC specifically, look how many scandals they have had over the years with predominantly male, white presenters, not all white, but all male presenters, employees at the BBC who have been caught up in these scandals. And it goes back to what I was saying about men in positions of power. That if the institutions that employ these men in these positions of power aren't willing to do anything about the allegations where they're brought to them, then you feel like, what is the point? I do feel like recently the BBC has gotten better at addressing these allegations because they've had to, because there's been so many, because they have a reputation of doing nothing, that they had to change. That people were like, well, hold on, we pay for the BBC, we pay for this programming, and yet when things happen, you don't do anything about it. So I think we have seen that change. But let's also remember that when Tim Westwood left the BBC after nearly 2 decades, he went to another institution. He went to Caps Lecture, which I believe is owned by Global. And he was still being hired by promoters, by other people. And so even though, you know, it's not the BBC, it's a different institution, we'll take someone on under the cloud of those allegations. And it goes back to believing women. It goes back to believing Black women. It goes back to listening to women when they are telling you their stories. And absolutely, Tolu, Giselle Pellicot nailed it when she said shame has to change sides. And shame has to be on the BBC, on the institutions, on Tim Westwood, on all these men in these positions of power that keep doing these heinous acts and thinking that they can get away with it. And also what Angel said so succinctly as well, is that they change sides and they now rebrand themselves as a feminist, and perhaps they go and, you know, cut a ribbon open with the woman and shake her hand and say, I'm sorry, and think that they can just do a rebrand, and therefore that takes away what they did. That wipes away the stain. That means, oh, we're not looking over there anymore. We're not thinking about what he did now. Now look at him. He loves women. He's a feminist. It's like, you know, we're not going to forget. And we always must hold these men to account and make sure that they are still walking under the cloud of shame and not people like Angel and myself.
So Angel, she's talked about the institution on one side. What do you think about institutions on the Nigerian side?
Okay, so it depends on what you define as institutions, because I have like 2 definitions. So in terms of, you know, the legal institutions, the workplace, and even religious institutions, I feel like when it comes to women's issues are not seen as human issues because when, I'm not going to mention the name again, but there was a certain school where sex tapes are often, by the way, I went to that school, sex tapes are often released and all of that, and there was a sex for grade situation there. And the response we saw was very abysmal. But when other issues came up, they were very quick to address it. So women's issues are not seen as first, as something to be attended to with the same severity. And it also translates to how workplaces treat women's issues. It's seen as a private matter. It's seen as something that should be handled. But when a man, for instance, does something that is very outrageous, that is not necessarily tied to a woman, workplaces would attend to him because it's seen as a dent on their reputation. So I'll give a good example. In this novel, Night Bloom by Peace Adjoa-Midie, there was this woman who was experiencing harassment from a politician, and the only way she could get justice was when he was arrested, not for sexually harassing women, but for just doing something totally out of line. Yeah. So I would say women's issues are not seen as human issues. So that's like the first port of call. If we want to address the sexual harassment, the rape, the assault, the battery, we have to start from the fact that women are not seen as human, and we must change that. We must make it unacceptable for anybody to be in close partnership with people who are, sexual assaulters. If these people are actors, we have to blacklist them. If they are journalists, we have to ensure that they do not have any columns they are writing for. If they are musicians, we have to ensure that cancel them totally. And I would say that even in terms of cancel culture is still very sexist, because we have people who say, oh, so-and-so musician is cancelled because he did this, he did that, he did this. But then, after he does the same thing of trying to rebrand, it's always like, let's forgive him, all of that. He comes
to err is human.
To err is human.
I can't stand it.
To err is human. But when a woman, I'm not going to mention her name again, when a woman has said something, quote and unquote, unfeminist or sexist for like 6-7 years ago, and she tries, you see her making efforts to, rebrand away from the things she said, whether it's genuine is another conversation entirely. Some women, feminists inclusive, would be shaming her, telling her, you did this, while these very same women would be supporting men who are known to be anti-women, who have...
So does that lend itself to us, to us being harder on ourselves, to women holding women more accountable to these higher standards that somehow no woman is ever able to meet?
I think so, yes. I think that sexism makes it such that women tend to be more forgiving of men. Even outside of sexual assault cases, you have feminist women who have friends, who have male friends who are very sexist, and they tend to make space for them. But then these same women, when a woman says something just out of line, they start telling her, they start being very harsh on her. The same grace that is not offered to their male friends, they won't give it to that woman.
Angel, I like the trajectory that question, because sometimes it's good to balance all sides, because I like to address sometimes what I would call this imbalance. Women are offered, it's like a carrot and stick situation. They want you to take a bite and they take it back from you. They want you to hustle for it. Chimamanda Adichie once said that girls are taught to dream, but not too much. About the ambition. They don't want you to be as ambitious. I will spend so many years empowering the girl child, and yet it feels as if it's like an uphill battle. We are trying to climb, but somehow the incline keeps getting higher and higher. What is this idea about women dreaming too much? What is this thing about that limit that they seem to place on the girl child? That yes, you can attain, but not this much. You can dream, but not this big.
Go and dream in your husband's house.
Exactly. And these are some of the things that shape the confidence of young women and decide the choices that they make. Because I see a lot of young women shrinking just for them to be able to fit into an already made box that they can actually outgrow. So how do we want to surmount this battle? Because it seems that's a battle they've been fighting for aeons. We see a little shade of change, but we're back to the beginning almost all the time.
Okay. So if I'm to give a good example or to answer your question, I will first start by saying, you know, Nigerians, we love marriage a lot. We love marriage as a country, and we even families that are quote and unquote progressive, they'll make it seem where as a woman you can dream as much as you want to dream, but if it comes in, if it's going to prevent you from getting married, do something else. So an example, let's say you want to go for your PhD after your master's, and then you're 26, 27, and a man is coming to you. Some parents will say, "Oh, you already have your master's. Just do it. Just do your PhD in your husband's house." And then the first baby comes, the second baby comes, and then the PhD is just it's a dream that takes the back seat. So I would say if we want to overcome the limits on women's dreams, we have to start with the idea that marriage is something that defines a woman, because women are taught to dream with marriage in mind. Men are taught to dream with themselves in mind, with their careers in mind. So I personally would say there's an obsession with marriage, and I'm not saying that wanting a family is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Weddings are beautiful. I love going for weddings personally. Yeah. They are really beautiful. But I would say that there is an obsession, an unhealthy, well, generally obsessions are unhealthy, but there's an unhealthy obsession with marriage such that it forces women to make choices that often come to bite them, 10, 15.
That come at the cost of their own dreams and ambitions.
Exactly. So it starts with parents not saying things like, "Is this what you do in your husband's house?" And I'm very proud to say that my parents never told me that. I think I'm an exception. Of course, my parents want me to get married and all of that, but I would have to, I'm saying it on live TV, that my parents have been very intentional about me dreaming as much as I want to dream, encouraging me. I'm doing my master's at the moment, and my dad was actually like, once you're done with this master's, you're actually going for your PhD. And I'm privileged to be able to have that kind of background, even though they obviously do have their own flaws. But a woman who is 24, 25, who cannot even call her mom without the first line being, your husband, where is your husband? You can't expect her to keep dreaming big. Even if she wants a business that is big, the most she would wish for is a husband that doesn't limit her as much as, most husbands tend to limit their wives. So,
data. I just wanted to remind you of that. The data says that you either, as a woman, marry a husband who is fully supportive, or you don't marry at all. Otherwise, you will not achieve your.
Afua, I just wanted to ask, because we're on a different divide and you are on another divide totally. So, what is the outlook of the girl child when it comes to dreaming from your own section of the world?
Well, I think actually that women's rights are in danger, especially here in the UK, because like I mentioned earlier on, we do have this right-wing movement that seem to be co-opting this stance for women and girls, saying that they are attacking the hotels that asylum seekers live in, and want asylum seekers and refugees to stop coming to the UK and in fact leave the UK because of the safety of women and girls. But when you look at the protests that took place, particularly last summer during the riots, something like 43% of those men who were involved in those riots had been convicted of domestic violence. And so the same men that say they are protecting women from these asylum seekers and these refugees from harming women have harmed women themselves. And so we have a situation where the right-wing racist movement are co-opting the rights of women and girls and saying they're doing it for women and girls' safety, and that is not what's happening at all. And so we have a situation where the rights of women and the safety of women is under threat here in the United Kingdom, and women all over the world are facing more pressures from things like social media, screen time, all those kind of things. And so I would say the outlook is, a little bit bleak. There's another statistic that came out that something like 90% of women have a story about a man, whether it comes to sexual assault, rape, whatever, part of the scale you are on. And so, yes, we can say it's not all men, but it's nearly all women have a story, and that is pretty shocking. So I would say the rights of women and girls are certainly under threat.
Well, Afia, you mentioned social media, and you're definitely right that in today's digital world, many women and girls face online abuse, you know, from trolling, body shaming, insults, sexist comments, and even harassment and cyberbullying, especially when they speak up on issues like feminism or politics. So how do we create safe spaces for women and girls in a world that is often trying to, you know, silence them online?
Have you also had that experience, Afia?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a Black female journalist that often has my head above the parapet, talking about various issues, politics, the royal family, whatever, I attract abuse on a daily. And, you know, it's something that I've had to get used to, sadly. I think what we need to do is we need to strengthen ourselves and our girls. And actually, that's not the way it should be, but that's the way it has to be, right? To realize that when these people are talking about you on social media, their opinion of you is none of their business. We need to limit screen time and social media use for our young people, but actually for ourselves as well, right? What are we looking at? What are we taking in? You know, making sure that our feeds and stuff are positive and we aren't going to come across things. And I know it's really difficult, but we don't come across things that are harmful. And a lot of times this stuff is sent to us. You know, the abuse comes directly to us. That's where social media companies need to step in, where they need to do the work. But of course, it doesn't pay for them to do that, right? It's not beneficial for them to have more moderation to make sure that certain keywords don't get through to people like myself. And so therefore we have to find ourselves limiting our use, limiting our time spent on social media so we don't have to see the abuse that might fly into your direct messages. And it's a real shame because actually it should be up to the social media giants to make social media a safe space. But like I say, it doesn't pay for them to do that.
Yeah, and you know, as she mentions it, there's a documentary coming out, and I hope we get them on the show. They're using Grok on social media, particularly on X, and they're asking it to undress women or to put them in suggestive positions and outfits. And you're just thinking to yourself, what is your problem? Like, what is the color of the problem that so many men have? But that's not what I want to go to because our time is limited. Angel, what do you think is the biggest threat to girls in 2025? And I say this after I read a story about a 10-year-old who was married to a 26-year-old man in Somalia. The family did not know where she was for 6 months. The authorities had to come in and remove her from his house, and he said that he's upholding the marriage. 10 years old. And this is after the news we heard last year that men in Somalia were crying because Somalia wanted to raise the age of marriage to 18. What is the biggest threat to girls? Afia, the question is coming to you too very quickly.
This is a very interesting question. To girls, I would say sexual harassment, sexual violence. I wanted to say gender roles and the expectation, unfair gender roles. But when I thought about it, I would say sexual harassment and sexual predators, because a girl can come from a very loving family that tries to ensure that her brother and her do chores equally and all of that. But then she goes to school and then her teacher is making passes at her. Her teacher is trying to, you know, get her to do things to him or do things with him or to him rather. And then she comes to church and then there's this uncle that's trying to buy her sweets and then she goes here and all of that. So I would say it's sexual predators and groomers. The fact that girls do not get to experience childhood. There's this article by a Ghanaian American writer called Shopelate, and she actually said that a lot of girls do not know what childhood is. They don't know the innocence of being a child because it was stripped from them. It was stripped from them. I have a cousin, and I was telling her, oh, if this happens, come tell me. If that happens, don't listen to this. And it made me stop and think, at what point are you really just, you know, carefree?
A young girl, you're
just leaving.
From age 7, they're already telling you, don't go here, don't do this, don't do that, don't go to this uncle's house, don't let this person buy you sweets. Don't wear this. At age 7, don't wear this, don't wear bomb shorts, don't do this. So I would say the biggest threat to girls is that they do not get to experience childhood because they're already burdened with the threat of sexual predators and sexual groomers.
That's a lot. Afia, what do you think is the biggest threat to girls in 2025?
I'm probably going to get lambasted for saying this, but the biggest threat to girls in 2025 is men. That's men in positions of power. That's men who are inflicting gender-based violence. That's men who are inflicting economic inequality, That's men who are making decisions about our reproductive rights. The biggest threat to women is men.
She dropped it and then she left it. She dropped it and then she left it. I wish we could go on, but it's obvious that these conversations have to continue. It has to be beyond a Saturday marking International Day of the Girl Child. It has to be beyond Women's Month, as Afua said. It has to be continuous conversations. And one thing Afua said is very true. Women's rights are being repealed across the world. There's a massive pushback that many of us do not see, but it is happening globally. And we need to take cognizance of it. Afua, thank you so much. Not just for sharing your story, but also the strength it takes to keep telling it. And because every time a woman chooses truth over silence, she makes it a little easier for another girl to do the same. Angel, thank you so much. Thank you for the work we do. You do, and I'm very sure this will not be the last time we see Angel on this table. Because this marriage obsession, Nigerians, we must talk about it. We must face it. Now today we're reminded that behind every headline and statistic is a real girl with dreams, with fears, with a voice that deserves to be heard and protected. And too often those voices are dismissed, their pain minimized, and their courage ignored. But conversations like this remind us that change begins when we refuse to look away. We shouldn't just celebrate this day every year. We should see it as a call to action. It's about ensuring that every girl can walk into a room, any classroom, or any workplace, knowing that she is safe, valued, and free to be herself. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.